Hi, this is Elizabeth Kasoniak, and my group was Ryan Donnelly, McKinley Sloan, and Aidan Wells, and our topic was Analyze the Nature, Extent, and Treatment of the Internal Opposition to Nazi State. So, the nature of internal opposition. Okay, so the political opposition. The opposition ranged from non-compliance with Nazi regulations to attempts to assassinate Hitler. Among the earliest resistance to the regime was the political opposition organized by leftist parties such as the Social Democratic Party and the Communist Party of Germany. However, leftist opposition within Germany proved ineffectual as the security police, also known as SIPO, crushed the leftist political organizations by force. So this is an example of a photo montage by John Hartfield, which appeared in the communist magazine known as AIZ. Hartfield has changed his name from Helmut Herzfeld in 1961 as a protest against the extreme nationalism in Germany at the time. This poster was produced shortly after the Reichstag fire in 1933 when the Nazis blamed communists for starting the blaze. Hartfield is clearly pointing to Hermann Göring as the real culprit. So there's also religious opposition. Efforts to coordinate religious life also followed the Nazi rise to power. Although the Concordat between the Vatican and the Third Reich in July 1933 regulated relations between the Reich and the Catholic Church, the Nazis went on to suppress Catholic groups and sought to defame the Church through a series of show trials known as the Priest Trials. While officially silent about the persecution of Jews, the Church played a role in the opposition to the killing of mentally or physically handicapped individuals, known as euthanasia. Moreover, individual clergymen sought to protect or help Jews. There was also a lot of youth opposition. Opposition to the Nazi regime also arose among a very small number of German youth, some of whom resented mandatory membership in the Hitler Youth. In Munich in 1942, university students formed the White Rose Resistance Group. This is one of the most well-known resistant youth groups. Its leaders, Hans Scholl, his sister Sophie Scholl, and the professor Kurt Huber were arrested and executed in 1943 for the distribution of anti-Nazi leaflets. A similar group was the Edel Weiss Pirates, who emerged during the late 1930s, located in the working-class districts of a number of West German towns. The pirates consisted primarily of 12 to 18-year-old boys who had no distinctive political ideology, but great antipathy towards the grim uniformity of the Hitler Youth and the general lack of freedom in Nazi Germany. It was during the war years, with a reduction in parental supervision and the severe disruption to local leisure facilities caused by increased Allied bombing raids, that the subversive activities of the Edelweiss pirates grew markedly. In the cities, they took part in pitched battles with members of the Hitler Youth and daubed subways with anti-Nazi slogans such as "Down with Hitler, we want freedom," "Medals for murder," and "Down with Nazi brutality." In addition, the Edelweiss pirates posted the anti-Nazi leaflets dropped by British and American bombers through the letterboxes of local people. And also in the military there was opposition. A group that included conservative military officers and diplomats believed that Hitler's violent death should signal a general anti-Nazi revolt. Military officers attempted to assassinate Hitler on July 20, 1944, in his East Prussian headquarters at Rastenburg. Colonel Klaus Schnig von Schnaffenberg left a bomb in a briefcase near Hitler during a military briefing about the Eastern Front. In this plot, Karl Gurl-Deller, a traditional right-wing conservative politician, was to replace Hitler as chancellor. The group even included on its fringes some disillusioned Nazis, such as Berlin police president Wolf Heinrich Count von Helldorf, and criminal police, also known as Kripo, Chief Arthur Nebe. Hitler survived the blast. The coup attempt failed, and Roland Freisler, Chief Justice of the People's Court in Berlin, presided over the trial of those implicated in the plot. Invariably, Freisler convicted the defendants. Most were executed at Berlin's Plötzensee prison. So then we have the extent of the internal opposition. This is an image, and if you see the one soldier circled, this is him resisting Nazi rule, and this is in Hamburg, 1936, and it says shipyard workers giving the Hitler salute as a ship is launched. One man in the crowd, he would have risked arrest, imprisonment, or death by keeping his arms folded as a gesture of defiance. And it's interesting because there's only one out of these hundreds of men who are conforming and doing the Hitler salute. So to what extent? There were nonviolent resistance, including sheltering Jews, listening to Allied radio broadcasts, and reading anti-Nazi newspapers. In the Nazi state, thousands resisted rule to some physical degree. Estimates are unclear because of the data from the time and the desire to hide the rise of internal opposition. The German population of the time was nearing 80 million people, so the recorded opposition is minute in comparison. Internal opposition did have an effect. Occasionally German efforts were slowed, lives were saved, and the morale of those being persecuted by the Nazis was boosted. However, no group was successful in overthrowing the Nazi Party. And then specifically the extent of the communist resistance. It is difficult to establish the exact extent of communist resistance, but the following figures offer a rough guide. In the summer of 1933, 50% of the KPD members still paid contributions to the party. In 1933, the Berlin Supreme Court heard 1,000 cases concerning resistance activities brought against members of the KPD. One estimate suggests that between 1933 and 1935, around 10% of these members, which was about 36,000 people, were active within the underground resistance. In 1935, the Gestapo, I just said a food, wow. Gestapo estimated there were 5,000 active members of the communist resistance in Berlin alone. Most of those involved in the communist resistance were of two predominant types: skilled members of the working class operating in factories and unemployed workers living in inner city areas. Okay, so now I'll go into the treatment of the internal opposition. So here's just an image showing how the officers would hang those who protested, and it's a very sad thing to see, but this is what was happening, and they really had to enforce their rules if they wanted people to listen to them. So one specific thing that occurred was the Enabling Act of March 1933. It gave Hitler enormous power over all Germans in Nazi Germany. It is no coincidence that in the same month, the first concentration camp was created at Dachau. Anyone who considered to be a threat to Hitler was arrested and issued with a D notice. The law was adjusted to allow the Nazis to effectively determine who was an opponent. Once labeled as such, arrest was inevitable. The development and expansion of various police units, both in uniform and in ununiformed, gave the internal security forces a massive level of power. The SD in particular was effective in rounding up opponents, imaginary or not. The SD cultivated a program of informants with rewards for the best ones. It is almost certain that any community within Nazi Germany had its informants. His or her word could end with the arrest of someone. Children indoctrinated by a Nazi education program were also encouraged to inform their teachers if their parents made disparaging comments about Hitler. So then here are some key terms that were covered in the presentation. We just went over the Enabling Act, and that was a law passed by the Riksdag in March of 1933, which gave Hitler extensive emergency powers for 5 years and removed constitutional limits on Hitler's authority. The Gestapo, not Gestapo, was the Nazi state secret police formed by Hermann Göring in 1933. They were responsible for investigating and dealing with opposition to the regime. The Security Service was a special police force in Nazi Germany founded as a personal bodyguard for Hitler in 1925. I'm going to try to pronounce this. The Gleichschaltung, was the alignment of individuals and institutions with the Nazi goals. And then, like we covered, the Social Democratic Party was banned in 1933 along with all the other political parties, but its exiled leadership and activists inside Germany continued to oppose Nazi regime, and then similar to this was the Communist Party. So then here is an example of a primary source, and this was the final letter of a communist to his father before execution by the Nazi regime for resistance activities. This was in May of 1943. So he said, "My dear father, be strong. I am dying as I have lived, as a fighter in the class war. It is easy to call yourself a communist as long as you don't have to shed blood for it. You only show whether you really are one when the hour comes when you have to prove yourself. I am one, father. The war won't last much longer, and then your hour will have come. Think of all those who have already traveled down this road that I must go down today, and will still have to travel down it and learn one thing from the Nazis. Every weakness will have to be paid for with blood. So be merciless. Remain hard." So that just shows how this communist was very passionate about what he believed in. He was fighting for his rights. And then this is guidelines for working in the underground communist resistance. And so it came from a communist pamphlet in 1941. It says, "The most important principles for our illegal activity must be reliability, punctuality, and caution. Anyone who sins against these 3 commandments not only jeopardizes himself, but all our work. Meetings in comrades' flats should be avoided if possible, since experience has shown that the blocks are often under surveillance. One should not go straight from home to a meeting place, but take a roundabout route in order to spot anyone who may be following. Our organization will only be based on factory cells, which should not contain more than 3 people. Only workers who have proved reliable should be admitted to these cells. Gossips and those partial to alcohol are to be excluded from party work on principle. Inquisitiveness and boastfulness have no place in the party." So this source just shows how protective and careful they had to be about things. And then our final source we show in the following videos, and here's just a OPVL outlining it. So this source is a primary source originally published by the New York Times newspaper on July 21st of 1944. However, it was accessed online through a website dedicated to Karl Dönitz, the commander-in-chief to the German Navy and a right-hand man to Hitler, whose speech is included in the New York Times newspaper. The text is simply a transcript of Adolf Hitler's, Karl Dönitz, and Hermann Göring's speeches presented to the German public and Nazi regime after an attempt to kill Hitler occurred by several Nazi officers. There is no analysis or commentary from other perspectives on the speeches. The speeches were originally given in German and later translated by the New York Times. The purpose of this document was to inform the American public, specifically the New York public, about the speeches of Hitler, Dönitz, and Göring presented in Germany after an attempt to assassinate Hitler. Since there is no commentary on the speeches, there is no bias that goes along with the newspaper publication, so it was simply published to inform. Newspaper was the main form of receiving the news and what was going on across the globe, so this format of publication was highly effective in reaching its intended audience of New Yorkers. The speeches contained are direct forms of communication to the German public about the attack and its outcome. Hitler, Dönitz, and Göring talk of what will happen as a result and attempt to boost morale and support of the Germans. The value. This document does provide significant value to understanding the internal opposition to Hitler and the Nazi regime. We are able to learn significant knowledge on the topic.
German men and women. I do not know how many times an attempt on my life has been planned and carried out. If I address you today, I am doing so for two reasons. First, so that you shall hear my voice and know that I personally am unhurt and well. And second, so that you shall hear the details about a crime that has no equal in German history. An extremely small clique of ambitious, unscrupulous, and at the same time foolish, criminally stupid officers hatched a plot to remove me and together with me virtually to exterminate the staff of the German High Command. The bomb was placed by Colonel Graf von Stauffenberg, exploded 2 meters, slightly more than 2 yards, away from me on my right side. It wounded very seriously a number of my dear collaborators. One of them has died. I personally am entirely unhurt apart from negligible grazes, bruises, or burns. This I consider to be confirmation of the task given to me by Providence to continue in pursuit of the aim of my life as I have done hitherto. For I may solemnly admit before the whole nation that since the day I moved into the Wilhelmstrasse, I have been imbued with the one thought only, to do my duty to the best of my knowledge and ability. Also, since it became clear to me that war was inevitable, I could no longer be postponed, and I lived practically only in work and worry throughout countless days and sleepless nights. An hour in which the German army is waging a very hard struggle. There has appeared in Germany a very small group similar to that in Italy that believed that it could thrust a dagger into our back as it did in 1918. But this time they have made a very great mistake. The assertion of these usurpers that I was no longer alive is disproved at this moment as I am talking to you, my dear German fellow countrymen. The circle that comprises these usurpers is extremely small. It has nothing to do with the German armed forces and particularly nothing with the German army. It is a very small clique of criminal elements which will now be exterminated quite mercilessly. The opposition is to be exterminated. I order, therefore, at this moment, that no civilian authority has to accept any order from an authority that these usurpers arrogantly assume. Secondly, that no military authority and no leader of troops and no soldier should obey any order by those usurpers. That, on the contrary, everyone is in duty bound either to arrest a person or bearing or is suing such an order to kill him immediately if he offers resistance. To create order at last, I have appointed Reich Minister Himmler to be commander of the army at home. Into the general staff I have called Colonel General Guardian to replace the chief of the general staff who had to retire for health reasons. I have summoned another proved leader of the Eastern Front to be his assistant. In all other Reich authorities there is no charge. I am convinced that by attempting out this very small clique of traitors and conspirators, we will now at least create that atmosphere in the rear at home that the fighting front needs, for it is impossible that in the front line hundreds of thousands and millions of honest men offer their utmost, while at home a very small clique of miserable, ambitious types constantly attempts to sabotage this. This time we will settle accounts in such a manner as we National Socialists are wont. I am convinced that every decent officer and every brave soldier will understand at this hour what fate.
Good. A man of the German Navy, sacred anger and unbounded fury is in us in face of criminal attempt that was designed to take the life of our beloved Führer. Providence has determined differently. She has guarded and protected our Führer and thereby not abandoned our German fatherland in his fateful struggle. A mad, small clique of generals that has nothing in common with our brave army has in cowardly disloyalty instigated this murder to commit a most base betrayal of the Führer and the German people. If these rascals and henchmen of our enemies, whom they served with unprincipled, dastardly, and false cleverness, in reality, their, their stupidity is unlimited. Believe that by removal of the Führer, they can free us from our hard but inexorable, fateful struggle. They do not see in their fearful and blind limitation that their criminal act would have thrown us into terrible chaos and would deliver us unarmed into the hands of our enemies. And furthermore, extermination and enslavement of our men and hunger and unbelievable misery would be the consequences. Unspeakable happiness would be the lot of our people, infinitely more cruel and more difficult than even the hardest days that the present war may entail, my good German folk. We will get even with these traitors. The German Navy they stand somewhere in allegiance to its oath, in well-trained loyalty to the Führer. Our devotion to duty and readiness for battle are unconditional. You will accept orders only from me as Commander-in-Chief of the German Navy and from your own military commanders so as to prevent any misleading, forged interests. You will ruthlessly annihilate any person who would or should turn out to be a traitor. Long live our Führer and Heil Hitler.
An incredible, mean attempt at murder was today committed against our Führer by a Colonel, Count Stauffenberg, acting in orders of a miserable clique for former generals who had to be chased from their posts for a leadership that was cowardly as it was incompetent. The Führer was saved miraculously by the working of an almighty providence. These criminals are now trying to spread confusion among the troops by issuing false orders, be it as a new government of the rich or as usurpers. I therefore have given the following order. Colonel General Stumpf assumes on my order the leadership of the formations of the Luftwaffe inside Rich territory as Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe of Rich. Only my and his orders are to be obeyed. When in doubt, confirm my telephone. Rich leader of the SS Himmler is, if requested, to be given every assistance by all commands of the Luftwaffe. Dispatch flights can be carried out only with my or his permission. Officers and soldiers, whatever your rank, and also civilians, wherever these criminals appear or approach you and try to draw you into their contemptible plans, they are to be arrested at once and to be shot. Where you yourselves are being employed for the extermination of these traitors, you are to proceed ruthlessly. These are the self-same curs who try to betray and sabotage the front. All officers have been abetted in these crimes, have put themselves outside the pale of the nation, outside the army, and outside all military honor, and outside of their oath and loyalty. Their extermination will give us new strength. Against this treason, the Luftwaffe pits the loyalty that it has sworn and its ardent love to the Führer and unreserved application of all its strength to victory. Long live our Führer, whom Almighty God has today blessed so manifestly.
those last three speeches were a representation of what Hitler and the Nazi Party did to the internal opposition. As you could see, they were ordered to be arrested and shot on the spot and to be ruthlessly exterminated as represented